I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. Stayed on Jesus. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on the Lord. Stayed on the Lord. Well, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. Stayed on Jesus. Hallelujah. 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 Well, I'm singing and praying with my mind. Stay on Jesus. Well, I'm singing and praying with my mind. With my mind. Stay on the Lord. You know I'm singing and praying with my mind. Stayed on Jesus. Hallelujah.
And the problem comes for us that we look at these texts, and we had a program at ITC dealing with sexual abuse of women, and one of the students, after our presentation, said, Dr. Bailey, you've shown several passages in the Bible where sexual abuse occurs, and in each one you've said God was on the side of the perpetrator. With Hagar, God sends Hagar back and says, submit to the oppression. God helps Leah keep turning out babies for Jacob, who hates her. How do you have sex with somebody you hate? But it seems like, it's okay. And God seems to be, is portrayed in the biblical text as being on the side of the perpetrator. And one of the students said, well, Dr. Bailey, if that's what you're saying, I was sexually abused by the men in my family from ages 8 to 15. And if the Bible presents God on the side of the perpetrators, then maybe what happened to me was God's plan for my life. And I said, that's the exact opposite of what I was trying to argue. I was arguing that these biblical texts are dangerous because they can make abused people think that their abuse is okay because God sticks with the abuser in the text. And somehow, what happens in situations of abuse is that abused people keep looking to the abuser to make it better. Now, my concern is that, and I raised this in one of my classes this past week, when one is in a situation where they have power over the life of other people, then there is no consent that the other person can give. And so entering into a non-professional relationship in any form is abusive. And I raised it in terms of, in our context at ITC, some people say, well, these students are adults. They're in their 40s. They can give consent. I say, yeah, they can get into the relationship, but then they can't get out of it because they're afraid their graduation is at stake. So it doesn't matter to me the age of the people, whether they were 17 or 71. That's not an issue. It doesn't matter whether they were same-gender loving or not. That's irrelevant. There is no way for one to be involved in the spiritual nurturing of people and then engaging with those people in sexual acts. When that happens, that is the abuse of power. And what I kept thinking of was in 2003 when the Roman Church was going through this and hearing one young woman said that from ages 8 to 12, the priest would come to the house and told the parents he had to pray for her, and he would take her out of the bedroom. He would rape her, put his hand over her mouth, and while he was raping her, would say, God is going to forgive us for this. Because we got a theology that all you got to say, what did Paul say? All you got to do is profess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and everything's okay. If we buy into that, then that means that perpetrators never have to be accountable for their perpetration. And so we have to look at how not only the biblical text, but also the theology. If we keep singing Amazing Grace, they saved a wretch like me. We keep saying at the cross, that I'm a worm. If we keep talking about ourselves in this type of language, then when we get abused, we think we deserve it. Because the theology has taught us, and the music has taught us, that we're unworthy of respect. And so I mean, what's being raised here is not so much, it's not just a question of this particular situation at a church in the Atlanta area. It's a question of how churches have developed theologies and have developed ways of understanding so that abused people stay abused and think that they're being loyal to God by putting up with the abuse.
Wow. Doctor.
That would be where I would.
Excellent. Dr. Fennell, I want you to talk about this abuse thing, from a psychological perspective of, what Dr. Bailey raised with abuse.
I think the first thing is to talk about whether it is looking at the theology, whether it's in the church, whether it's at home, whether it's amongst people that just know each other or don't know each other at all. Again, it is not about sex. It's about control. It's about abusing. It's about taking somebody and oppressing them, making them feel less than and lesser than, so that we're able to, the perpetrator is able to have that type of control over someone else. In a church situation, in a home situation, when you look at incest, you're looking at a power differential that you walk into. You walk into your home knowing your mother is your mother and your father is your father and you're the child. You walk into church knowing the pastor has a role and all others, he is ministering to them. So this power differential sets up a situation where there is grooming, there's the opportunity for taking advantage of somebody. They feel like they don't have a voice. You can't say something. If I said something and I was assaulted, what punishment, as you saw in your case, what punishment is that going to give me? And so we take on that responsibility that says, well, something must be wrong with me that I deserve this, or this is, because if somebody in this referent power, in this power over me, has the ability to do this to me, I must deserve this. There must be something wrong with me. The other side of it is people oftentimes, perpetrators oftentimes make their victims believe that they're special, that this is part of the reason why they were chosen to have this special relationship. And if you break that special relationship, not only are you going to hell, but you have just ruined a good thing. And there is nothing good about being taken advantage of. There's nothing good. We talk about it as abuse, as assault, as rape. There are, I'm sorry. I'm normally so loud.
Oh, I'm sorry. He wants you to bring your mic closer to you.
There are normally so many words that we use for us, and what it comes down to is you are being raped of the person that you are from within yourself. Your identity, who you are, how you respect yourself, how you think of yourself. If you are the victim, you're being raped of that person.
Can you talk about, too, how, because one of the things I talked about was psychic scars, how they live with it. Talk about how that confuses you for the rest of your life about your own sexuality, because at that point.
What the research shows when trauma occurs within an individual, whether it is as a child, whether it is as an adolescent or an adult, you actually become arrested in that place of that abuse, because our bodies and our minds cannot make sense of what's happening to us. So we have to somehow develop some kind of logical or rational way of looking at what has happened to us. We make excuses for our abuser. We make excuses for our situation. We turn our lives inside out to somehow have some meaning in something that is absolutely meaningless. And so we kind of get stuck. You know, you look at children at the age of 7, at the age of 10, at the age of 13, 14, who were abused, and their sexuality from that point forward is confusing, whether it be same sex, whether it be opposite sex, because nobody should be able to have that type of control. And when you take that type of control over someone, psychologically it changes something within us. It creates an internal confusion within us. Sometimes you see it in depression, rebelliousness. There's different symptoms to look for in children, but internally, the child, the person, the individual, the victim, the survivor, they become arrested in that place.
Wow. Dr. Can, what does this mean for us as a community, as a church? What does this mean, this act that that's been accentuated, you know, that's been blown up? What does this mean for us?
I think one of the things we need to remember is that although churches are a divine, holy community, in one sense, they are also a social and human institution. And as such, they can be critiqued just like we would critique any other institution. And they are susceptible to the same kinds of flaws, tendencies that we see in secular institutions. And one of the things that happens in churches is that as an institution, they end up promoting, maintaining, recreating the hierarchies, the systems of abuse that are present in society as a whole. And so while churches can be great places of nurture, places where people can be made to feel important and can grow and be places of freedom, they can also be places of control and abuse. And although we have the question of accountability comes up in this issue in the churches, we have a problem of accountability in leadership in our country as a whole. We have had recent instances in the business world where corporations and CEOs of corporations have abused their power and seemingly have gotten away with it. And we have a problem holding them accountable for it, even in our legal system. And so part of that problem comes from some of the ideas we live with in our culture. We promote certain ideologies of individualism, of these ideas that we all have equal opportunities, and that therefore if someone has become wealthy or been successful, somehow it was due to their own ability, and if you are poor, it's because you did not have those abilities. And when you have this kind of political ideology, it tends to, again, support and maintain abusive systems of power. And even to the point where poor people, although it's not so often so crudely put, oftentimes you will hear arguments that at the heart of the argument is, if you are poor, it's because you have a spiritual problem. And it legitimates abuse of power by saying it's somehow part of God's will, just as Dr. Bailey was saying. Perhaps the secular equivalent of the idea of praying, God, you know, forgive me for my sins and everything is okay, is the idea that we live in a democracy and so therefore everyone has an equal chance. So therefore what happens must be dependent upon you. It must be your fault. And so that just perpetuates these things in our society.